we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Cradle conversation. My name is Laura Halpin. I am recording from my home in Walnut Creek on the stolen land of the Bay Miwok. I use she, her pronouns, and I am really so thankful to have my guest and friend, Dylan Wilder QUINN, in conversation today. So I just wanted to say hello to you, Dylan, before I introduce you.
Hey, Laura, thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you. So Dylan and I met in Andrea Renee Johnson's Coaching as Activism, which feels like a lifetime ago.
Yes.
And it was when I was becoming increasingly aware that as a nutritionist and health coach, there wasn't just a possibility of my business causing some harm and really perpetuating oppression, but that it was likely and probable. And so I joined in this group with Dylan, and I was immediately drawn to their light. And even though I was excruciatingly uncomfortable in the group and exploring my whiteness and white supremacy culture, which I didn't even know was a thing at that time, there was a very much this feeling of being held by someone who was incredibly loving, and that was Dylan.
Thank you.
And so Dylan is a person who is doing a lot of anti-oppression work, both with individuals in their consultations. And I want to ask you about that. And is also offering workshops entitled Disrupting Our Whiteness, which I have participated in along with Jenny Pearl. And both Dylan and Jenny are part of an organization called Holistic Resistance that is led by Erin Johnson and Portia Bede, and they have been doing a lot of movement up and down the West Coast, engaging in conversation and connection around racism and anti-oppression work. And so anyway, I am really excited to have you here, Dylan, and I'm excited to ask you about where you're at in your work. What's your current emphasis?
That's a great question. I think a lot of my emphasis and my whole team's emphasis, thanks for introducing everyone too, I'm really touched by that, is wearing a lot of hats. So there's not any one emphasis, like the name Holistic Resistance implies. Like we can't just be doing one thing to be fighting resistance, and we've got to be deeply taking care of our bodies. So it's also not like go out and do everything, but on an individual level with the consultations, it's like part holding folks where they're at, holding and doing the trauma healing that's necessary to do anti-oppression work well and in the long term, and then and really pushing folks to grow around what their edges are, right? And so I work with fellow trans folks on that, both like holding our own identity where we're oppressed and holding our own identity where we're privileged, for example. And one of the things I'm really excited about is we're growing our trans intimacy work, which is working with cisgender folks who want to learn how to be closer to trans people. There is a huge part of, I think kind of there's this myth out there in cisgender bodies that was perpetuated by trans folks as we were first starting, like, what does trans outreach look like? What does trans advocacy look like? That the most important things are bathrooms and pronouns, right? And those are very important. And they're not the most important thing out there. In fact, cisgender folks over focusing on pronouns has
Mhm.
gotten me in a lot of danger, actually, and a
Mhm.
lot of non-safety. So trans intimacy is a line of work around building closeness, specifically to trans folks, learning how to track our trauma stories better, noticing, um, learning how to hold our trauma better, and just noticing when our trauma's up, whether it's around family or swimming. You know, there's a lot of different things around gender that I think a lot of people don't notice.
Right.
That's almost always up for us. So trans intimacy is dispelling the idea of like we can't be close, um, and we can be close, and there are some really important ways to try to be close. And then holistic resistance as a whole, we're always focusing first and foremost on ending racism, with a focus on ending anti-Blackness,
Mm.
uh, through relationship and connection. So when we travel up and down the coast, we're really trying to be in relationship with folks who want to be in relationship for life around, around ending their racism. And we really believe that shame and blame can't be the driving forces of that, um, and that connection and relationship need to be. And so we're like constantly trying to find that balance between holding people where they're at and, pushing folks a little bit further. So
Mhm.
that's that's both the short and long of what I'm focusing on right now. Some of it's also just supporting trans folks in crisis right now,
Mhm.
because that's what a lot of what we're doing. So
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you talking about the tension and it's just this dynamic between, like, I can't remember the words that you used, I just lost them, but kind of holding people and supporting people where they're at, and
mhm.
also like, okay, let's get going.
Yeah,
Let's push it.
yeah.
Um, and I think that one of the things that I learned with you in Andrea Renee's class and also in Disrupting Our Whiteness with you and Jenny was how I was really focusing on the, okay, let's get going. And I wanted to override the where am I at? And I'll never forget the time where I can't remember if we were on a phone call or what, but you asked me how my heart was. And I like completely like, I don't know, like somersaulted over it because I so didn't, like, I don't want to talk about my heart.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
remember you drawing me back and you're like, you actually didn't answer my question. So yeah,
So touched that you remember that.
yeah, it was real because I became so conscious of how easy it is to override where we're at,
Mm,
you know, and and how much of that we can really attribute to white supremacy culture,
yeah, yeah.
Um, so thank you so much
So
for all of the work that you're doing and all of the ways that you've supported me in my journey, which I won't take. We have a half an hour, so I'm not going to go into, but I could take about 27 minutes to talk about. So
so
anyway, did you? I'm sorry. Did I interrupt?
oh, I'm so touched. Thank you for naming that. Yeah, yeah, really touched.
So in this time, I am really interested in what is holding you, what's cradling you.
Hmm. So much. I think one of the things that I've been really, really grateful for is, which is kind of in its own sick and twisted way, but all the ways I've already had a lot of skill and practice as a trans person navigating a world that's not built for me.
Mm,
Um, I feel like I have a lot of adaptation and flexibility that's been built. Um, in order to do anti-oppression work, I had to move into a van because I wasn't going to be making that much money. And so um, when, yeah, so when housing stuff became unstable right at the beginning of coronavirus. I was like, oh, I had my van already there, ready to go. I had a water system, had a way to get electricity, you know. So it's very like basis, like that's cradling me right now, just like the preparation that's happened. Building relationships with people long distance is really cradling me. Like my whole team, Aaron, Portia, and Jenny, we all got close over long distance, and they're just the closest people in my life.
And that was pre-corona, like that.
Pre-corona. This is all pre-corona. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what we do in our work, especially when it is long distance, again, pre-corona, but now all of us are in it right now, is we held a lot of people around this idea of like, I don't think I can get close to people over the phone. I don't think I can get close to people over Zoom. And we're like, well, let's see. Like we hear kind of the opposite, but actually like encouraging folks to notice the agency that they have in their own bodies when they say like, oh, I can't get close to people right now. And it's like, well, what questions could you ask yourself and that other person so that changes? What questions could you ask another person so that you can feel close to them right now? And usually it's deeper than the like everyday, like, so how you holding up, you know? So that's really cradling me, is all of the attention that I've been putting on creating informing questions and asking people questions for the last several years. And I've learned about that from several different folks, but I think I like perfected it with my teammates, with Aaron Johnson and Portia Bede, especially, like just this idea of like, you know, let's ask each other questions as if we're going to be in relationship for life. And a lot of what's been cradling me right now is asking people questions long distance, and still fighting to be close to them over distance. And the other thing that's really been cradling me is in my partnership, making sure that we are treating it as like, okay, we're in this together. Like, let's invest in this relationship together right now. So we have a quarantine and connection thing on Facebook for a while. We got honestly too tired to keep it going, or connection in quarantine, that's what it was called, connection in quarantine, where we shared what are the ways that we fought for closeness with each other every single day in quarantine. And that included holding each other emotionally, asking each other questions. We also massage each other every night to sleep. It's really sweet. So things like that, just like those moments of like, let's show each other that we care for each other. That's been really cradling.
Yeah. I really appreciate that you came into this with a lot of skills in place, and that kind of agility and you know, responsibility to crisis or need. And so it's pretty fascinating, you know, that your own response to trauma perhaps and has equipped you. I don't know, would you say that that's true?
I would say that wasn't the case 5 years ago. I would say that 5 years ago, and I think a lot of that, I feel a lot more empowered around my own marginalization, and a lot more aware of my privilege as well. But I think 5 years ago, I felt really unable to navigate systems well. And I've rearranged my life with the help of other folks, with the help of holistic resistance, rearranged my life so that I'm not having to navigate as many systems every day. And when I do have to, I have a lot of support around that. So like I said, like I live in a van so that I don't have to, I'm at Jenny's house right now, so it doesn't look like a van, but I don't, when a landlord kicks me out, I'm still really mobile. When a landlord gets transphobic or, like I still have that mobility. It keeps my trauma responses more at bay. I've made sure that I stock up on my medicines because it's takes me 6-7 months to get health insurance. But if I have a stock of the testosterone of what I need, then I'm not as stressed about it. So yeah, that's what I guess. Yeah, I've had to get really intentional about preparing myself for just the emergency of being trans every day. I also work alongside Black folks who have to prepare and navigate being Black every day, which was which like racism was a virus long before coronavirus was, in Aaron's words. And so, yeah, really I've spent every day for the last 3 years responding to emergencies, and having to try to figure out how to get my life, how to care for myself, with the chronic pain that I have, with the PTSD that I have, how to care for myself while also doing anti-oppression work. And I think that's all deeply prepared me for this work. So I'm really, for this moment right now. So I'm really grateful. I'm not grateful for the oppression that made it like that. I'm not grateful for the fact that oppression has sped up right now, that Black folks are dying more than white folks. I'm not confused about why people want to why white folks want to open up the economy right now, while Black folks are dying. But I'm noticing that many of us who are oppressed are the most prepared for a pandemic like this, and we're also the most traumatized because of how much control the government has already put on us. And it's like, oh, and here's one more. So it's complex, and I want to just be like, yeah, it's great, I'm totally prepared.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. Thank you for just digging us a little bit deeper into the complexity and the nuance. I appreciate that. So I'm watching the time. I shouldn't ask follow-up questions. Dylan has an appointment.
We have so
right
many,
after.
we have a whole lifetime. We have a whole lifetime to reach for each other.
So is there a cradle that you'd like to offer us?
Sure. I think just like on the note of what I've been saying so far is that, I've been learning and practicing so much about the power of questions these last 3 or 4 years. And so just love to practice asking each other a question, and answering it from our hearts, whatever we want to ask. You can always say no to any question. And then I think Portia told me this rule first about questions. She was like, you never ask a question that you're not willing to answer yourself. So that's the only guideline around questions. But yeah, would you be willing to just try asking each other questions so that we can try to be closer to each other?
Yes. Will you go first? That's my question.
Is that your question?
Yeah.
With asking the question?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. What is one way, over the course of these last few months, what's one way that you've, or what's one thing that you've really loved about yourself, or learned to love about yourself, or grown deeper in love with yourself about?
The thing that I'm loving about myself, and I do love about myself, is my enthusiasm for leaning into my intuition and trusting the urges and the just my own intuitive language, and how more and more I'm ceasing to question it and treating it more as a really vital piece of who I am
Mm.
that makes my life feel more magical and really more powerful. Yeah.
Mm. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's
And I had to just like hold my hand here just in case you asked me something that scared me.
I saw that.
Okay.
We're not trying to scare each other, but I know it's like nervous. It's nerve-wracking when it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is a video that's going out there in the world. So thank you
Uh,
for your vulnerability. Yeah.
okay. My question for you is, what is something that you have offered to someone recently that you know has really shifted their experience?
Mm. I think it's so funny that you asked. That's a great question. One of the first things that came to my mind was like times when I've like pushed my partner a little too far and like it's shifted it for the worse, and I've like had to walk it back. So I had to like dig a little bit deeper so that that wasn't my only answer.
Ah,
I think one of the things that really touched me a couple weeks ago, a dear friend of mine was mourning a parent passing away, and there was so much of me that wanted to like invite her to like mourn that parent and invite her to like go deeper, and there was just like a part of me that was like, you know, hold back, just like name that you're noticing it, but like don't like really try to push it in any direction. I just like spent a lot of time in silence over the phone. It was like uncomfortable and awkward in some ways, but like the release that she was able to have and like the grief she was able to access when like I was just there being with her, um, was really, really special and touching. And I would say that probably shifted her experience because I wasn't like trying to push her into it. When she was like, I'm ready to come out of it, like we started talking about something else. And yeah, it was really powerful, for me anyways. I won't speak for her. But, yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that question.
I,
And
so this is good. This is okay. So this is the cradle that you're offering, and this is the practice is just asking a genuine question and kind of hanging with it. Yeah.
yeah, and just being with the fact that we're not in person, we haven't been in person for a while, and yet in this moment, like I feel a little bit closer to you, like learning more about your intuition, learning more about how you feel more powerful in it, and then also just hearing what your question was. I feel like I know you a little bit more, getting to share a little bit about myself. I feel closer to you too, and having that held by you. So that, I mean, it's really one of my favorite practices, is just being in touch with people long distance like this, and just like daring to get closer against all those narratives that say that long distance pulls us apart.
Thank you. I think that's a really pertinent tool right now. And I also really appreciate that you're giving us a tool to kind of reach across perceived barriers, or, a way to manage what feels like imposed isolation and give us a way out or through that. So thank you so much. So
Thanks for being in that vulnerable practice. I'll put you on the spot a little bit. I appreciate that.
I'm getting used to you. What you put me through. I can't escape. Um, so the last question is, do you have a blessing or a what is my word? I'm losing it. A vision for the collective?
Mm. Yeah, in this moment, as people are starting to talk about reopening again, and there was a lot of talk a couple months ago of like, there's no way we can go back to business as usual. And as idealistic as I am, I think there's actually every reason why we will go back to business as usual.
Mm,
And so my blessing, my vision, my hope is that all of us who had noticings over these last couple months about what wasn't working for us, for ourselves, for our bodies, for the collective, may we remember that.
mhm,
May we remember that. May we continue to slow down and ask questions, not just like this, where we're getting closer to each other, but maybe ask questions of the systems around us. Why
mm,
were homeless folks suddenly able to be housed overnight in this moment, but not the last, 100 years? Yeah, why were we suddenly able to decarcerate folks who are at risk of dying when before they weren't? So that's really my wish and my vision, is that may we continue to get close to each other, and also maybe remember all the questions that we had
mm,
in this moment about our culture.
mhm.
Yep,
Thank you. That is
yep,
so important. So it seems like the theme of this, our time together, is really questions. And I have so much more to ask you and
yes. So
talk about around there. But
yeah.
I, I just want to acknowledge the people who will be connecting with us across space and time.
Mhm.
And I forgot to welcome them in, but we are appreciating that connection and the possibilities that this conversation provide to grow closer to one another and to cultivate that kind of steady presence in each other's lives that I think is so healing.
Mm.
And so, Dylan, I just want to thank you so much for being here and being my friend.
Mm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your friendship, and thank you also for putting on these conversations and holding them for folks across space and time. It's been really sweet to see them created.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for thank you for doing that.
It's been my pleasure. All
Yeah.
right. So I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
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 Sounds